Don't feed the trolls. A brilliant piece of advice that everyone should follow when navigating the internet. But what about if you ignore that advice? What if you fed the trolls? Well, let's see how that works out. In 2010, a security expert by the name of Aaron Barr decided to make one of the dumbest decisions of his life. He declared war on the now notorious and out-of-control hacker organization known as Anonymous.
We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
Of course, this was a silly notion, as Anonymous is a concept and not a traditional group with a hierarchy, but that didn't stop Mr. Barr from claiming otherwise. Aaron, along with his company HB Gary, publicly announced to the world that they were going to track down Anonymous members. The motivation for this was simply to inject cash or interest into the currently lackluster company coffers, as evidenced by Aaron's eventually leaked emails. But while Mr. Barr was doing the rounds with interviews, tooting his own horn, being featured in the Financial Times, Anonymous had taken notice of his activities. New operation channels were then created in the Anonymous online headquarters of an IRC server, one channel simply being called HB Gary. Users entered and plans formulated. Initially, the Anonymous users hit Aaron with their usual tactics, just a few simple sparring distributed denial of service attacks, commonly referred to as a DDoS. The result was the HB Gary corporate network going down for hours, even days at a time. Aaron at this stage of the story believed he was being targeted due to his research being so good that he had really found the identities of the leadership of Anonymous, and that's why they were trying to bring him down so badly. They think I have nothing but a hierarchy based on IRC aliases, he wrote. As elite as these guys are supposed to be, they don't get it. I have pwned them, smiley face. But Aaron was completely underestimating Anonymous. At this stage, they weren't even really trying to bring him down, they were simply messing with him. Though very quickly that was going to change, because with the DDoS of HB Gary's network, Aaron said the gloves were now off. He'd picked this opposition, provoked them into a battle, and was now upset that they were fighting back, despite the fact he was publicly saying he was going to expose them to the FBI, with the result them locked up for potentially the rest of their lives. Still, Aaron was confident he would win. He continued to collect his information and prepared for a meeting with the FBI in just under a week's time. This was private information. Nobody but Mr. Barr knew. Or at least that's what he thought anyway. You see, in his head, he truly thought he was smarter than the group of Anonymous. He thought he'd track them down, and if he turned them over to the FBI, he could secure some lucrative contracts for his security firm. But he was being watched the whole time, and 5 days before he could make it to the meeting, well, Anonymous decided to hit him with a cold, hard dose of reality. His home internet went down, every single social media account, email, was all inaccessible. Mr. Barr quickly discovered that he was the one who'd been thoroughly pwned. The HB Gary website, while once professionally presented, was now simply graffiti left by the hackers, simply letting him know that he'd been bitch-slapped by the hand of Anonymous. Their words, not mine. If this was all that had happened, it could very easily have served as a warning. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. Anonymous had gained access to the corporate database, ripping through thousands of confidential emails, then releasing them on popular torrent website The Pirate Bay. During the hours of these revelations, a representative from the parent company that funded Aaron Barr's HB Gary offshoot business pleaded with Anonymous via IRC to leave the company alone. They even threw Aaron Barr under the bus, stating they'd never seen his list of alleged Anonymous members and that they were even pissed off at Aaron for doing this. As you would guess, Anonymous didn't budge, giving outrageous demands that the company should retract investment from HB Gary, fire Barr, and donate his salary to WikiLeaks whistleblower Bradley Manning's defense fund. At the end of it all, Aaron Barr was left utterly embarrassed and set the business behind by millions of dollars in damages, as well as an irreparably harmed reputation. From all the leaked communications, everyone around Mr. Barr had warned him for months to stop what he was doing, to leave Anonymous alone, and predicted such an outcome. Everybody knew better, except for Aaron Barr. He sincerely thought he could use the shadowy organization's notoriety to propel his business and his own name into the limelight. And realistically, he did, though in the exact opposite way he expected or would have wanted. So that's what happens when you feed the trolls and try to leverage their attention for corporate or personal gain. But what about when you fight with them over your political views?
He will not divide us! We must secure the existence of the white people on He will not divide us!
After the surprise result of the 2016 US presidential election, a trio of creatives launched a performance project outside the Museum of the Moving Image in New York City. The main figurehead of this performance was none other than Hollywood A-list actor Shia LaBeouf. This project involved a live feed and the tagline, "He will not divide us," speaking of course about Donald Trump. The trio encouraged people to deliver these words to the camera as many times as they wished in what they called a show of resistance. This camera was running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and planned to operate for the entirety of Trump's presidency, whether that be 4 or 8 long years. I say planned because it didn't last more than a couple weeks, at least not here anyway. Pretty quickly after going live, the anti-division and inclusive nature of the protest was put to the test as 4chan discovered an opportunity to troll Shia and those who were using the live feed for its intended purposes. People began showing up and at first spoke of inside jokes and memes to signal to those watching that they were from 4chan. Very quickly, this escalated as the trolls went from memes and jokes to edgy statements of an anti-Semitic nature that I don't think I can repeat on a monetized YouTube channel relating to Hitler's actions. Now, of course, these people were being edgy, they were trolling to try and push the buttons of people watching, specifically to try and get Shia LaBeouf angry. They figured out exactly how to get to him as quickly as possible, and they just continued. You could see Shia become increasingly confrontational and angry, leading to his eventual arrest after multiple scuffles with the disruptive participants of the livestream. He even got so angry at some points he was fighting with his own supporters who'd really done nothing wrong. Due to the volatile nature of the livestream and the constant news coverage of the installment, the museum decided on February 10th to end their involvement with Shia and the project, forcing them to shut down and move. This led the He Will Not Divide Us movement and livestream to New Mexico, where it lasted from February 18th to 23rd, just 5 days before being forced to close again. This time due to someone pulling a gun during the livestream, as well as reportedly unrelated gunshots during the night, raising security and safety concerns. On March 8th, Shia decided to eliminate the human component of the live feed and instead simply point a camera at a flag in the sky, rippling majestically in the wind, emblazoned with the chant, "He will not divide us." At this stage, Shia had already ignored the most important rule of the internet. He'd fed the trolls, engaging with them in what was an escalating manner from speaking to shouting to grabbing and pushing. He'd entertained them and even challenged them to continue. This led to his protest becoming the #1 focus of their attention. So even when Shia lost ground by moving the camera to a secluded location, 4chan didn't plan to stop. Instead, they turned it into a game, and they made it their mission to capture that flag. Now, as you can see, all they had to work with was what you can see on screen and hear from a camera pointing at a flag in the sky, which would lead you to believe there was very little information about where the flag could be located. But 4chan being 4chan, found it in just 38 hours. Using a mixture of airplane contrails, flight tracking data, stars during the night, noises and social media posts from Shia, they collectively found the flag location to be in Greenville, Tennessee. They then enlisted the help of a local 4chan user who was tasked with driving around honking his car horn until people could hear the sound on the stream and use that to triangulate the flag's exact location. Then, during the early hours of the morning, they stole the flag and replaced it with 2 items, the first being a Pepe the Frog t-shirt, acting as somewhat of a calling card of 4chan's involvement, and the second being a Make America Great Again hat. The thing that would likely annoy Shia the most, given that it was the antithesis of his He Will Not Divide Us protest. This forced the project into yet another decision of either shut down and admit defeat, or try again to hide their movement where 4chan could not find it. This led them across the Atlantic Ocean to Liverpool, England, where the livestream resumed with another flag defiantly flying in the sky with the words, "He will not divide us." Within 24 hours, 4chan users in England gained unauthorized access to the 5th floor of the Foundation for Art and Creative Technology building, and once again found the flag, winning what was now considered the greatest game of capture the flag in history. The police advised the Foundation to remove the flag due to concerns of dangerous and illegal trespassing, leading to a 4chan victory and an increasingly annoyed Shia LaBeouf. At this point, it seemed like Shia had given up as he handed over the project briefly to Luke Turner, the second member of the trio who devised the original plan outside the museum in New York months prior. Luke Turner set up the most secure livestream to date, a white wall, no audio, no objects visible, and just the words of the chant, "He will not divide us." The only clue 4chan had was a light on the flag. They figured out this was a window, waited for the sun to set, figured out which time zone the flag must be in, searched for whether Luke Turner owned property in that time zone, and then sent a 4chan user with a flashlight to the location, and they found the flag in less than 4 hours. Though this time, they decided not to break in and steal or deface it, instead choosing to order massive numbers of pizzas to the house in question and laugh about how they had clearly won the game. After all, what kind of message does it send about your political movement, about how he will not divide us, when you're hiding the flag away in the corner of a room, not featuring human beings, who ironically your "He will not divide us" has united in one common goal? It seemed like this would be the end of the story. It seems like 4chan had won, and the stream remained this way with everyone getting bored and just moving on. That is until October 16, 2016. This time, Shia collaborated with Lalu Unique in France, who hosted the flag on top of their building. You see, everybody now thought this was a foolproof idea, considering there was no physical way to get to the flag as it was installed by a crane. But obviously Shia had again misunderstood 4chan and their ingenuity when it came to a challenge. 9 days after the flag arrived and during the dead of night, a flaming drone appeared on the livestream, getting closer and closer to the flag, attempting to set it on fire live for all to see. Unfortunately, just like Shia LaBeouf on the streets of New York, the drone couldn't handle the heat and quickly smashed into the ground, which could have been 4chan's loss, but instead, the flag was quickly moved due to a safety concern, leading to another victory. Now it became very clear to all, this flag could go nowhere publicly without this happening. So the flag was again hidden away, and 4chan became bored. Clearly their goal had been achieved. Shia's initial feeding of the trolls led to his protest that promoted unity, succeeding only in unifying people against him, against his movement, while his own goal remained hidden away from the world he sought to rally. The live feed continued and eventually closed down on January 20th, 2021, but received little to no coverage or interest hidden away for the 3 years of peace it finally received. Obviously, he intended this to be a big PR stunt, and it was at the beginning for the wrong reasons from his perspective. But by the end, nobody really cared. So far, we have a cybersecurity expert with a multi-million-dollar company trying to feed the trolls to the FBI, and a Hollywood superstar trying to rally support against a politician. But what about when a corporation decides to feed the trolls?
Yo, it's GeoHot! And for those that don't know, I'm getting sued by Sony.
With the release of the iPhone, a young hacker by the name of George Hotz had made a name for himself online by jailbreaking the now incredibly popular device. Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak praised George for his achievement, calling him a creative, where many others had been calling him a criminal. George Hotz, also known by his online tag as GeoHot, moved on quickly to working in the corporate world with a position at Google, before abandoning the rigid structure of a normal life and heading back to his preferred jailbreaking ways. That's where Sony enters the story. GeoHot got his hands on a PlayStation 3 and got to work doing what he did best. Shortly after, he announced online that he'd done it. What he had done exactly was exploit a program running on the PS3 to unlock restrictions placed by Sony, allowing the video game console to essentially operate like a traditional desktop computer. This would allow for users to customize, develop, and run programs that would otherwise have been impossible. Also, it would allow users to play pirated material, a real big issue for the copyright holders, Sony. They took notice and, unlike Apple, took immediate action. They first patched the area of code George had exploited, which started a game of cat and mouse, as George simply found another hole to get to the cheese of an unlocked system. Sony's response this time, likely knowing that the patch and break cycle would continue, was instead to take George to court. On January 11th, 2011, George Hotz was listed as a defendant in a case claiming he had violated the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, facilitating copyright infringement. Now this is where Anonymous comes into the story. Due to Sony's overly aggressive attack also targeting anyone in the peripheral, Anonymous were angry. You see, Sony had not only gone after George, but they were sending subpoenas to big tech, Twitter, Google, YouTube, internet service providers. They were keen to track down anyone who downloaded the jailbreak code that George had released online. They even tried to access George's PayPal account to target anyone who had donated to him money and supported his work financially. This all made Anonymous very angry, who released a statement of warning. Congratulations, Sony. You have now received the undivided attention of Anonymous. You saw a hornet's nest and you stuck your penises in it. You must face the consequences of your actions, Anonymous style. Now this threat could have been empty bravado from an organisation that was impossible to understand, but later that day, on April 4th, Sony quickly discovered that they should have taken the situation much more seriously than they had done so. The entirety of Sony's network was taken down. This attack lasted for 3 days straight until Anonymous relented, claiming that they'd made a mistake in targeting the PlayStation network, causing unintended damage to the users, who they were of course trying to defend with the hacks and regretting their harm to those same users. Already within 3 days, this hack likely cost Sony millions of dollars in operational costs and lost revenue. But what it really did was send a message to the corporation that things could easily become much worse if they continued down the path they'd chosen. Whether due to this or other circumstances, Sony and George Hotz reached a settlement agreement ending their legal dispute just a few days later on April 11th, 2011. Unfortunately, due to the decentralized nature of Anonymous and the fact that anybody could claim to be involved, there were elements working within that umbrella name that were still stung by Sony's actions and saw their legal overreach as a reason for more substantial response. On April 19th, Sony services went down again. This time, however, it was Sony themselves who took down the servers, which is odd. Nobody knew what was going on, but they assumed it was yet another Anonymous attack. Maybe just another simple DDoS bringing down the network for a few days. This is when the Anonymous social media account who released the previous statement denied their involvement, stating they had nothing to do with what was going on, and they were not lying. They just didn't know that another, smaller, more dangerous and skilled group were behind the attack, and they were also claiming Anonymous. While the main attack on the Sony servers was a crude brute force approach, this new attack was covert and carried out with finesse. The group gained access to Sony servers on April 17th, almost unnoticed, and escaped with gigabytes of stolen data. Over 100 million Sony accounts were leaked. Their data stolen, including names, email addresses, passwords, home addresses, dates of birth, and more. While Sony scrambled to figure out what was happening, the small group was celebrating their victory, even releasing information on exactly how they perpetrated the hack. Sony had to keep the PlayStation service down for all users globally for around 23 days, a situation that undoubtedly cost the corporation tens of millions of dollars in lost revenue, maybe even more. There was also unintended consequences for Sony, such as legal and regulatory responses from governments across the planet. Overall, I'm pretty sure they regretted what they did and how they did it. They learned a very valuable lesson, one that they wouldn't be keen to repeat. So that's what happened one of the times the corporation fed the trolls. But what about when a social media company does it? Understand that the time is closing in for our imminent attack on the cancerous louse known as 9gag.com. As Anonymous, we must push our differences aside for the moment and combine our efforts to strike the common enemy. All users from 4chan, Tumblr, Reddit and Funny Junk must come together and front unparalleled fighting force if we wish to truly make an impact against those scum. In 2011, there were a handful of social media sites that occupied much of the same space, just in slightly different ways. 4chan, Reddit, Tumblr, Funny Junk, and 9gag. Chances are if you used one of these image board style sites, you didn't use any of the others. This led to competition between the users of each site, which in truth had their own unique characteristics. There wasn't much that users of each site agreed about, except of course when it came to their unified dislike of 9gag. Now it's important to remember that at this time in internet history, everyone knew that you didn't provoke 4chan. It just wasn't the smart thing to do. So how exactly had 9gag done this as a collective to provoke such a reaction? Well, They stole memes. Yeah, that's right. They were taking memes that were created and used on 4chan and claiming that they were their own. They also called themselves the 9gag Army and were considered cringe, just lacking in creativity, and generally annoying as a community all over the internet wherever they went. For that, 4chan decided it was time to ruin their day, collectively, even if that meant joining hands with the less edgy websites that were considered less cool. A tough pill to swallow, but easily washed down with the realization that at least these other websites were not 9gag. Anon split the social media strike force into 4 different groups: Alpha Team, Gold Team, Red Team and White Team, each with their own unique instructions. Alpha Team were in charge of the Trojan Horse. They were instructed to pose as regular users of the 9gag community, gaining their trust before springing their trap from the inside. They were instructed to download Tor, the Onion router, which is essentially the portal to the dark web, but also a secure and anonymous web browser originally developed and deployed by the US Navy Intelligence Agency for more secure communications abroad. The reason they were told to download Tor and hide their identity online became apparent with the other instructions, which called for the Alpha Team to post illegal material that would land you in jail or on a sex offenders list for the rest of your life. Not just that, but other disgusting images of an illegal nature, essentially the most shocking things you could ever see online that would be sure to tarnish the 9gag website's image if it was discovered to be hosting these things, but also scar the minds of the users who would be unfortunate enough to open the website on that day. Alpha Team was additionally instructed to make posts on 4chan with whatever images they uploaded to 9gag, so users involved in the Alpha Team could go and like all the images, posting comments with a smiley face and pushing them to the front of the website. Next up was Gold Team. Gold Team's job was much simpler, though still completely illegal. Unlike Alpha Team, who were tasked with an attack from within, Gold Team was an attack from outside, according to the instructions, so outside that they were in outer fucking space. So they were tasked with using the Low Orbit Ion Cannon, also referred to the LOIC, and the High Orbit Ion Cannon, or HOIC. A famous program used by 4chan over the years to perform distributed denial of service attacks on their target. What once would have been complicated was an open source program repurposed by a 4chan user, and now it was as simple as inputting a URL and an IP address. After that, you hit the much memed "I'm a charging my laser" or "fire the laser" button. Essentially, these programs simply use your internet connection to spam data to the target, which alone wouldn't be a huge deal. But if enough users pooled their data at the same time, at the same target, with consistency, it would inevitably overload the servers of the target, making them unstable or even bringing them down completely. With a large enough group of people in the Gold Team, they could essentially keep the 9gag servers offline indefinitely if they wished. This, of course, is highly illegal, but nobody seemed to care. Next was Red Team. This was one of the least involved roles, which, as a concept, was incredibly smart to include for the operation that was now called Operation Deep Throat. All the Red Team had to do was spread the word across social media. Relay this information everywhere. Use this poster. Spam it wherever you go. Make sure as many people as possible knew of the operation. So why was this smart? Well, percentage-wise, 4chan would have the highest concentration of users comfortable with the illegal activities, but other websites would see a significant drop-off in this participation. Giving users that were less inclined to perform illegal activities some way to meaningfully participate would increase the reach and also the likelihood of them getting caught up and more involved. Which then brings us to White Team, who were tasked with tarnishing the 9gag reputation online. This was another potentially legal role, but one that required the participant to be comfortable with an incredible amount of edgy behavior and language. The images you'll see on screen will probably look like a CIA document released in court, with how much I've had to redact the language and blur. Essentially, the instructions are to go all over social media and advertise 9gag as the place to be for racists, homophobes, and sexual predators. In combination, 4chan's plan was to ruin the 9gag website completely by performing a handful of highly illegal activities, and they decided to do this because 9gag users had annoyed them, stolen some memes, and were generally annoying online. The operation commenced on December 21st, 2011 at the stroke of midnight. Thousands of users channeled their hatred for 9gag and managed to bring the site to its knees. Maybe that's why it was called Operation Deep Throat. Either way, over the next few days most of the 9gag servers were offline, in part due to the raid, and in part due to the Trojan horse users tricking 9gag into DDoSing their own website by giving them their own IP address and claiming it was 4chan that they could now DDoS to get their revenge. There were of course also many posts of unsavoury, scarring and illegal material. Luckily for 9gag, 4chan got bored pretty quickly and moved along after what was another successful operation. One of many, as over the next decade, this would continue. For Operation Deep Throat, this reminded the 9gag army that the golden rule of the internet still applies. So that's what happened when a rival social media website fed the trolls. There are dozens of other examples where people either intentionally or unintentionally went to war with Anonymous and 4chan, though usually the person, organisation, company or website had the good sense to play dead and wait until they simply got bored and moved on to someone else. Sometimes, as with these examples, they continued to fight back. Either way, it never ended up well for them, so always remember the advice: do not, under any circumstance, feed the trolls.